The cold concrete of the aisle was digging into my bare knees, but I barely felt it. Not through the red haze of adrenaline and the metallic taste of blood pooling on my lower lip. Crack. Another agonizing snap echoed through the crowded grocery store, followed by the sickening slide of aluminum against tile, as Karen yanked my second crutch out from under my arms. Who does that? Who physically disarms a disabled stranger in the middle of aisle 4 just because they couldn't cut in line? Sigh. Let's back up for a second, because if you saw me right now, sprawling across the linoleum of a suburban Walmart like a discarded ragdoll while a 40-something woman in a zebra print visor uses my medical equipment like a golf club, you'd think this was a scene straight out of a trashy Netflix fever dream. But no, this was my actual Tuesday afternoon. My name is Leo. 3 weeks ago, a distracted driver on a cell phone decided red lights were merely suggestions, leaving me with a shattered tibia, a heavy fiberglass cast running up to my hip, and a pair of shiny aluminum crutches that had quickly become the bane of my existence. Every single step was an endurance test. The metal grips chafed my palms until they bled. The rubber tips squeaked on every polished surface like dying mice, and the dull, throbbing ache in my lower leg was a constant reminder of how frail the human body really is. I had ventured out of my apartment for the first time in days because I had run out of basic human necessities, namely coffee, instant ramen, and the heavy-duty painkillers my doctor prescribed. All I wanted was to grab my supplies, hobble to the self-checkout, and retreat back to my couch to binge-watch crime documentaries. I didn't want trouble. I didn't want a scene. But the universe, it seemed, had appointed Karen as its personal weapon of mass frustration. Enter Homeowners Association Karen, or as I would soon learn her full legal name, Karen Vance, the self-appointed tyrant of the nearby Whispering Pines gated community. You know the type. Immaculate blonde bob sprayed so rigid with aqua net it could deflect a bullet, pastel pink yoga pants that had never seen an actual gym, and an aura of unearned entitlement. So thick you could slice it with a butter knife. I first noticed her near the deli counter. She was berating a teenager behind the glass who couldn't have been older than 16. TSK. I said, thinly sliced, you incompetent child. Is your brain as soft as this turkey? Her voice was a grating, fingernails on a chalkboard screech that made everyone within a 50-foot radius wince. The poor kid was trembling, muttering apologies while adjusting his paper hat. I rolled my eyes, adjusted the weight on my good leg, and squeaked my way past her down the snack aisle. Just ignore her, Leo, I told myself. Get your stuff and get out. If only it were that simple. By the time I reached the checkout lines, the store was jammed. Only 2 registers were open, and the line for the express checkout was crawling at a glacial pace. I slotted myself into the queue behind an elderly gentleman buying cat food. The metal crutches were digging painfully under my armpits, sending sharp spikes of nerve pain down my ribcage. Ugh. Every second standing was sheer torture. I leaned heavily onto the left grip, closing my eyes for a brief moment to breathe through a wave of nausea. Swoosh. A blast of heavy, cloying lavender perfume hit my face before I even opened my eyes. Suddenly, a plastic hand basket slammed violently into my lower back. Move it, buddy! A voice barked right into my ear. I gasped, losing my balance for a split second before digging the rubber tips of my crutches into the floor to catch myself. I turned my head slowly. Standing less than 6 inches away was zebra print visor. Karen. Her arms crossed over a chest adorned with a bedazzled sweatshirt that read LIV, laugh, love. Excuse me, I said, keeping my voice low, though my heart was beginning to thump against my ribs, like a trapped bird. You heard me? Karen snapped, her manicured acrylic nails tapping aggressively against the handle of her basket. You're taking up the entire aisle with those stupid sticks. Some of us actually have places to be. Step aside and let me go first. Ma'am, I've been waiting in this line for 10 minutes, I replied, gesturing down at the massive white cast encasing my right leg. And, as you can see, I can't exactly step aside easily. We're all waiting our turn. I don't care about your little excuse, she hissed, her blue eyes narrowing into venomous slits. You're moving too slow. You took 5 minutes just to hobble down aisle 3. People like you shouldn't even be out in public during peak hours. You're a hazard. A hazard? Did she really just call a guy on Crutches a hazard? A few people in the adjacent line turned to stare. The air in the store suddenly felt heavy, thick with that uncomfortable silence that happens right before a public explosion. My hands were sweating against the foam grips of my crutches. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment creeping up my neck, but beneath the shame, a small flame of anger began to ignite. I have just as much right to buy my groceries as you do, I said firmly, turning back around to face the cashier. The line starts behind me. That was my mistake. Dictators don't take kindly to being ignored. Deep breath. What happened next occurred in a terrifying blur of noise and motion. Don't you turn your back on me, you pathetic faker, Karen shrieked. Before I could react, I felt a heavy, violent yank on my right crutch. Karen had reached out, wrapped her fingers around the metal pole, and pulled with all her weight, because I was leaning most of my body mass on that side. To keep pressure off my broken leg, the sudden loss of support sent me spinning off balance. Clang! The right crutch hit the floor with a deafening metallic echo. I let out a sharp, involuntary yell as my weight crashed down onto my fractured tibia. Pain, blinding, white-hot electric pain, shot up my leg and exploded behind my eyelids. My vision blurred into swimming spots of black and yellow. I instinctively threw out my left arm to catch the nearby display rack, but my hand slicked off a plastic shelf of gum, sending boxes of Tic Tacs cascading to the floor. Ah! My leg! I screamed, collapsing hard onto the cold tile. The impact jarred my spine, knocking the wind straight out of my lungs. Gasp! I lay there on my side, gasping for air, clutching my leg as fresh agony tore through the set bones. Tears of pure pain welled in my eyes, spilling down my cheeks. Oh, stop the drama, Karen sneered, stepping over my left foot while holding my stolen crutch in her hand like a trophy. You barely fell. Get up and stop embarrassing yourself. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Yelled a man a few yards away, a large guy in a high-vis construction vest. He's hurt. Drop the crutch. Stay out of this, you redneck, Karen screamed back, her face twisting into something truly demonic. She raised my metal crutch into the air, holding it horizontally like a riot baton. He assaulted me. He hit me with his bag. I'm defending myself. Nobody hit you, lady. Put the stick down. Another customer shouted. Panic snapped through the crowd. People began pulling out their phones, screens lighting up like fireflies in the dim store lighting. The cashier slammed the emergency button under the counter, the shrill beep echoing through the intercom system. Karen didn't back down. Cornered by the sudden outrage of the crowd, she completely snapped. Her eyes rolled wild and bloodshot. Get away from me. All of you. Back off, she screamed, swinging my aluminum crutch wildly in a wide, vicious arc thwack. The heavy metal tip struck the construction worker straight across his forearm as he stepped forward to disarm her. He grunted, stumbling back into a display of chips. She's crazy. Call the cops, someone yelled. I was trapped on the floor, dragging myself backward with my elbows, my cast scraping against the linoleum as Karen stomped right toward me, weapon poised high above her head. Is this really happening? Am I about to get beaten to death by a Karen with my own medical equipment in the middle of Walmart? Heavy panting. The cold metal of the second crutch was still lying a few inches from my outstretched fingers. I reached for it, my heart hammering against my ribs, as the shadow of Karen's raised weapon fell over my face. Back off, you useless cripple, Karen bellowed, her voice reaching a piercing frequency that made my eardrums physically vibrate. She brought the stolen aluminum crutch swinging down with brutal, reckless force, aiming straight for my chest. Swish! Ugh! I didn't think. Survival instinct simply hijacked my shattered body. Lunged to the side, rolling hard onto my uninjured left hip. The heavy metal pole smashed into the linoleum floor right where my ribs had been a microsecond earlier. Crack! The violent impact splintered the edge of a floor tile, sending sharp ceramic debris spraying across the aisle. A collective gasp erupted from the circle of horrified onlookers who were backing away in sheer terror. My right leg violently twisted. During the roll, white-hot, sickening agony shot through my knees straight up into my brain. Gasp. I choked on my own air, a guttural scream catching in the back of my throat as black spots danced across my vision. Stop, please, I gasped, clutching my cast with trembling, sweat-slicked fingers. You're going to kill someone. You did this to yourself, Karen shrieked, totally untethered from reality now. Her zebra print visor was lopsided, her rigid blonde bob disheveled, and her eyes wide with a manic, unhinged fury. She raised the crutch again, stepping forward to finish the job. Clatter! My hand slammed down onto the grip of my second crutch lying in the aisle. With every ounce of strength remaining in my upper body, I swept it across the floor like a hockey stick, slamming the rubber end straight into Karen's ankles. Whoa! Karen squawked as her pink sneakers were swept out from under her. She lost her footing completely, flailing her arms like a dying windmill before crashing to the tile with a bone-jarring, thudding crunch. Her plastic grocery basket sent canned soup, organic avocados, and high-end pasta sauce flying through the air. A bottle of vintage marinara shattered on impact right beside her head, splashing thick, blood-red liquid all over her pristine white designer sweatshirt. For 2 agonizing seconds, the store fell deathly silent. The only sound was the low hum of the fluorescent lights and my own ragged, desperate breathing. Karen lay there, in a pool of crushed tomatoes, stunned, staring up at the ceiling. Then, she looked down at her stained love shirt. Her face flushed from pale shock to a deep, dangerous shade of purple. Sigh. My shirt, she whispered, her voice trembling with rising hysteria. My imported Italian tomato sauce. You monster. She scrambled up onto her hands and knees, wiping marinara sauce from her face, looking less like a suburban homeowners association president and more like a swamp creature emerging from a red bog. She grabbed the first crutch off the floor, gripped it tightly with both hands like a broadsword, and let out a blood-curdling screech as she lunged toward me on her knees. Freeze! Put the weapon down now. The sharp, thunderous command cut through the chaos like a whip. 2 blue uniforms burst around. The corner of aisle 3. Enter Officer Rodriguez and Officer Vance, 2 heavy-set, no-nonsense patrol officers who looked like they had dealt with enough suburban madness for 3 lifetimes. Their hands were resting heavy on their holsters, their boots squeaking firmly against the floor as they moved in with practiced tactical efficiency. Thank God, I groaned, collapsing flat onto my back, every muscle in my body trembling from adrenaline overload. Officers! Oh, thank God you're here. Karen instantly pivoted, her tone switching from rabid wild animal to helpless victim in a fraction of a second. She squeezed her eyes shut, letting out fake, breathless sobs while pointing a trembling, red-stained finger at me. Save me. This unhinged man attacked me. He knocked me down. He threw sauce in my face. He hit me with his stick. Look at what he did to me. Officer Rodriguez glanced at Karen, covered head to toe in red marinara sauce, holding a metal crutch above her head. Then he looked down at me, a guy lying flat on the floor in a massive leg cast, pale as a sheet, bleeding from a split lip, with a scattered mess of Tic Tacs around my head. Rodriguez unclipped his handcuffs. Ma'am, drop the crutch. Slowly. Are you blind? Karen screamed, dropping the fake tears instantly. The manic screech returned with full force. I am the victim here. He's a menace. He's faking that broken leg. Look at him. Arrest him. Ma'am, this is your final warning. Officer Vance barked, stepping into her personal space. Drop the medical device onto the floor right now. Instead of complying, Karen did the single stupidest thing a human being could possibly do in front of two armed police officers. She slammed the crutch down against the floor and lunged directly at Officer Rodriguez, reaching out her acrylic-nailed hands to scratch at his face. "Don't you talk to me like that. Do you know who I am? My husband is on the city council." Clink. Snap. "Ow! Get off me. You're hurting my wrists," Karen howled. In one fluid, expert motion, Officer Rodriguez grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back, and slammed her front first against the nearest metal display shelf. A shower of candy bars rained down on her head as the steel handcuffs clicked firmly around her wrists. "Karen Vance, you are under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon, disorderly conduct, and resisting an officer," Vance recited coldly, ratcheting the cuffs tight. "You can't arrest me. I have an homeowners association meeting at 4. She shrieked, kicking her pink sneakers uselessly against the air as they hauled her up to her feet. Marinara sauce was dripping from her chin onto the officer's pristine uniform. "I will sue this entire store. I will have both of your badges. Let me go." The entire crowd erupted into applause. The construction worker she had hit earlier raised his bruised arm and cheered, while several people filmed her being marched down the aisle, her zebra print visor finally sliding off her head and bouncing onto the floor. Officer Rodriguez knelt down next to me, his stern face softening with genuine concern. "You okay, son? Don't try to move. Paramedics are already on their way." Deep breath. "I've been better, officer." I managed to laugh weakly, wincing as the movement pulled at my lip. But honestly, watching those handcuffs click on her was better than any painkiller my doctor could ever prescribe. Rodriguez cracked a rare grin, handing me back my battered aluminum crutches. "Hang in there, man. The show's over." As the distant wail of ambulance sirens grew louder outside the automatic doors, I leaned back against the cool tile, closed my eyes, and took my first real breath in 30 minutes. Karen was going to jail. My leg was still broken, but for the first time all day, justice tasted sweeter than instant ramen. The harsh, blinding fluorescent lights of the emergency room felt like they were drilling directly into my skull. My head throbbed, syncing perfectly with the agonizing pulse radiating from my freshly recasted leg. Ugh! The paramedics had scraped me off the Walmart floor, pumped me full of a glorious cocktail of heavy painkillers, and loaded me into the ambulance while I watched Karen, still drenched in marinara sauce and sobbing hysterically, being shoved into the back of a black and white squad car. "I'm going to sue you for everything you own, you crippled menace." That was her parting scream, muffled by the heavy glass of the police cruiser, but loud enough to etch itself permanently into my traumatized brain. 2 days later, I was back in my small, dimly lit apartment, elevated on a mountain of pillows, trying to eat cold delivery pizza. The throbbing in my leg had dulled to a constant ache, but the anxiety was just starting to peak. The police had taken my statement at the hospital. They told me there were over a dozen witnesses and clear security footage. It should have been an open and shut case. But Karen's parting threat echoed in my ears. "Sigh, my husband is on the city council." Could she actually make this go away? Could a woman who assaulted a disabled man with his own medical equipment just buy her way out of trouble because she lived in a gated community and threw money at lawyers? The answer arrived on Thursday morning in the form of a sharp, aggressive knock at my front door. I dragged myself off the couch. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The rubber tips of my crutches, the new, temporary ones the hospital gave me, since my original ones were sitting in a police evidence locker, announced my slow, painful journey to the entryway. I cracked the door open, the chain lock pulled tight. Standing in my hallway was a man wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. He had slicked back silver hair, a briefcase clutched in his hand, and an expression of utter, condescending disdain. "Mr. Leo Harper?" he asked, his voice smooth and cold. "Yes," I replied cautiously, adjusting my grip on the crutch. "My name is Richard Vance." I'm Karen Vance's husband, and I am here to formally serve you with a notice of intent to sue. He shoved a thick manila folder through the narrow gap in the door, nearly hitting me in the chest. My heart plummeted into my stomach. Sue me, I choked out, staring at the folder in disbelief. Your wife assaulted me. She beat me with my own crutch in the middle of a grocery store. There are 20 witnesses. My wife, Richard Vance said, his eyes narrowing into venomous slits, is a respected member of the Whispering Pines community. She is currently enduring severe emotional distress, reputational damage, and physical bruising as a direct result of your reckless behavior. You intentionally tripped her with your medical device, destroying her personal property and causing her deep public humiliation. She slipped on her own marinara sauce. I yelled, my anger suddenly flaring hotter than the pain in my leg. She attacked me. We have retained top legal counsel, Vance continued, completely ignoring my outburst, his tone robotic and rehearsed. We are suing you for assault, emotional distress, and defamation. We are prepared to tie you up in civil court for the next 5 years, drain your savings, and garnish your wages until you are bankrupt. However, he paused, a smug, oily smile spreading across his face. If you call the district attorney's office today, formally drop all criminal charges against my wife, and sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the incident at the store, we will withdraw this civil suit. You have 24 hours to decide, Mr. Harper. Good day. He turned on his heel and strode down the hallway, leaving me standing there, shaking with a mix of fury and pure, unadulterated terror. Deep breath. I closed the door, locked it, and slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, staring at the manila envelope. Inside were dozens of pages of dense legal jargon, demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. I was a 26-year-old freelance graphic designer living in a one-bedroom apartment. Didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have savings. I barely had enough money to cover my own medical bills, let alone fight a corrupt city councilman in civil court. I was going to lose everything. For exactly 3 hours, I panicked. I called my mom. I called a free legal clinic that put me on hold for 40 minutes before disconnecting. I paced my apartment, hobbled frantically around my apartment until my legs swelled up and throbbed with white-hot pain. But then, as I sat on the couch with an ice pack on my knee, staring blankly at my laptop, an idea began to form. Desperate, crazy, absolutely nuclear idea. Karen wanted to play dirty. Karen wanted to use her power, her money, and her reputation to bully a guy with a broken leg into silence. Fine. I opened my web browser. I didn't need a high-priced lawyer to win the court of public opinion. I just needed the truth, and I needed an audience. I logged into a local neighborhood watch app, the exact kind of app where homeowners association presidents like Karen spent all their time complaining about tall grass and suspicious teenagers. But I didn't post there. No, that was too small. I opened Reddit. I found the massive, highly active subreddit dedicated to local city drama and public freakouts. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Title: City Councilman Richard Vance is blackmailing me after his wife, Homeowners Association President Karen Vance, beat me with my own crutches at Walmart. I wrote everything. I poured every ounce of pain, humiliation, and terror into that post. I described the smell of her lavender perfume, the terrifying screech of her voice, the blinding pain when my cast hit the tile, and the sheer audacity of Richard Vance showing up at my door in a tailored suit to threaten me into silence. But a story isn't enough on the internet. You need proof. Remember when I said people in the grocery store pulled out their phones? During the chaos, a teenage girl in the checkout line had actually airdropped me her video of the assault while I was waiting for the paramedics. I hadn't looked at it since that day. I clicked the file on my phone. The video was crystal clear, shot in 4K resolution. It showed Karen, red-faced and unhinged, physically ripping the crutch from my arm. It showed me collapsing in agony. It showed her winding up and swinging the metal pole like a baseball bat, screaming, Back off, you useless cripple. Sigh, it was hard to watch. My stomach churned seeing myself so helpless. But I knew what I had to do. I uploaded the raw, unedited video to YouTube, linked it directly to the Reddit post, and hit submit. Then, I turned off my phone, took a painkiller, and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to my apartment buzzer ringing off the hook. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I groaned, dragging myself out of bed. It was 8 a.m. I grabbed my crutches, gritted my teeth against the morning stiffness, and checked the intercom camera. There was a news van parked outside my building. 2 local reporters were standing on the sidewalk with microphones. My heart hammered in my chest. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and turned it on. Ping, 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 ping. Notifications exploded. Across the screen so fast the phone physically lagged. My Reddit post hadn't just gone viral locally. It had hit the front page. The video had 3 million views on YouTube. My inbox was flooded with thousands of messages from outraged citizens, lawyers offering pro bono representation, and local journalists begging for an interview. But the most satisfying notification was an email from the local district attorney's office. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed and read the DA's message out loud. Mr. Harper, we have reviewed the newly surfaced video evidence regarding the assault by Karen Vance. Furthermore, we have been made aware of the attempt by Richard Vance to coerce you into dropping charges. Please be advised that the DA's office is upgrading the charges against Mrs. Vance to felony aggravated assault. Additionally, an independent investigation has been opened into Councilman Vance for witness tampering and extortion. Gasp! I read it again and again. The heavy, crushing weight of fear that had been sitting on my chest for 2 days evaporated. Instantly, I hobbled over to the window and peered through the blinds. The reporters were still down there, waiting. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to tell the entire city exactly who Karen and Richard Vance really were. 6 months later, I walked into the county courthouse without crutches. My leg had fully healed, leaving only a faint ache when it rained. I sat in the front row of the gallery, wearing a sharp suit of my own, and watched as the judge brought the gavel down. Karen Vance, looking pale, deflated, and utterly stripped of her pastel Homeowners Association glory, was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management classes. She was also hit with a permanent restraining order, banning her from coming within 500 feet of me or the local Walmart. Her husband, Richard, had been forced to resign from the city council in disgrace after the extortion scandal broke. They had been forced to sell their house in Whispering Pines to pay the massive civil settlement their insurance company ultimately agreed to pay me. As the bailiff led Karen out of the courtroom, she stopped for a brief second and made eye contact with me. There was no screaming this time, no threats, just the hollow, defeated stare of a bully who had finally picked on the wrong person. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just gave her a slow, steady nod, turned on my heel, and walked out of the courthouse on my own 2 completely functional legs. Justice isn't always swift, and it rarely comes wrapped in a neat bow. But sometimes, when you stand your ground, even if you have to stand on one broken leg to do it, the universe makes sure the right people end up in handcuffs.